As the title said, in this episode we're building a shed. Now, if you haven't already seen my channel update video, to give you the quick version, there are things happening in the background which have delayed the mini project. As I said in that video, eventually I will explain what happened, but for now I'm running out of storage space, so building the shed should help alleviate these problems. Step 1 in building a shed is to create yourself a base. Or, as I did, go away on holiday for a month and return to find your retired builder of a father has done it for you. Cheers, Dad!
Right, I've opted for a metal shed. I know they're not the most aesthetically pleasing, but in my opinion they take a lot less maintenance work over their life and are a lot more secure. I have no idea which one of these boxes has the instructions in or the first part, so I'm just going to open them all up and yeah, basically start going through them and see what's in there. That's the base.
After moving the 2 boxes of parts we didn't need out of the way, my dad wanted to go and make a cup of tea, sit down and study the instructions, whereas I just wanted to get on with building a shed and refer to the instruction manual as and when needed. I won that argument, and so started removing all the parts needed to build the base out of the box.
Knee pads, kids, trust me, older you will thank you for these. To my older audience members, you'll probably agree with me.
With all the base pieces laid out, we proceeded to screw it all together. The kit I bought came with some optional base pieces. I will discuss more about these later in the episode.
Okay, now I see why I give you the gloves.
It didn't take long before I managed to injure myself while assembling the shed. Fortunately, it was very minor, just a graze, but as the kit provided PPE gear, I decided to put it on to prevent any further ones. With the base complete and slid forwards and to one side to give us enough room to work, we started building up the sides. The instructions said to fit all 4 corner pieces first and then fit all the side panels, but because of where my shed is positioned, we had to deviate from this. I can't be the only person that has a shed up against a fence or wall. Now, neither of us realised it at this point, but my dad unfortunately is about to make a critical mistake. With the side completed, my dad and I moved the shed over to one side, still leaving a gap so we could access the rear. With the shed slid across into position, we cracked on with getting the rear wall assembled. With the rear of the shed built, we had to fit one more panel before we could slide it back into its final position. We had to fit this panel now, otherwise the wall would have prevented us from fitting the screws at the bottom of the panel. With the last corner panel fitted, we could then wrestle the shed into its final position. Apologies there is no sound, I'm not quite sure what happened to it. On the bright side though, you don't happen to listen to the god-awful sound of metal being scraped on concrete. With the shed in its final position, we could finish off the left hand side and the front. Well, a bit of time has passed, my memory card filled up, camera batteries died, so I had to go and charge stuff and basically download footage. But in the meantime, we carried on. We managed to get the front together. That's been fun and games because the stuff not been lining up. I think something's ended up on top of the box which I bought stuff from, and it's like squashed the front panels. As I corrugated, it's kind of made them longer, which made holes and things not line up. Anyway, we got that sorted out. We got the shed into its final position, and we also got this wall in minus that panel. We've gone through the boxes multiple times. We are definitely missing a panel. I will be in touch with the company that I bought the shed off, and if they don't deal with the problem and send me on my missing panel, I will be naming and shaming them. Insert clip here now if they didn't deal with the problem. Anyway, we're going to move on to making the roof trusses, front and back, and then we can start getting the roof on. The roof trusses differed from the norm in that instead of being attached together using self-tapping screws like the walls and the base, these had to be bolted together. As well as the two halves of the roof trusses needing to be bolted together, some brackets also needed to be bolted in place. These were what the beams in the roof would be attached to. With the truss made, I carried it to the back of the shed so that it could be fitted to the top of the rear wall. With the trusses made for both the front and rear of the shed, my dad and I got them into position and then screwed them into place. Admittedly, my dad didn't quite get his finish before we installed it, it was missing the air vents, but with the sun setting we wanted to press on and try to get the roof done. With the trusses in place, the next logical step was to get the beams in. For packaging reasons, each beam came in 2 pieces, so these had to be bolted together before they could be installed. While we did get the beams in, we ran out of time before the light faded to get the roof panels on. Please note that the camera makes things look a lot brighter than they actually were.
Day 2.
First thing we had to do was fit the missing side panel. After my dad had left, I spent a bit of time tidying up. Somewhat by accident, I discovered where the missing panel was. The only issue was getting to it. It turned out we'd accidentally screwed 2 panels together, one over the top of the other. To retrieve this panel, we ended up having to ask my neighbour for permission to go through their property and remove the fence panel to gain access to the side of the shed. With that done, we could get it fitted before moving on to the roof. While I finished putting the remaining screws into the side, my dad got the first roof panel put in place. The following day, I was unfortunately by myself as my dad wasn't able to come and help me. Fortunately, none of the remaining jobs required a second person. My first job was to fit the edge pieces to the roof. While my dad couldn't be there to help me, he had accidentally forgotten his electric screwdriver the day before, so that was quite handy.
Now I've got to figure out how to get that ridge piece off and reach all the way over there, which I can't really do. So yeah, leave this one with me, and so hopefully I can come up with a solution.
The reason for having to remove the ridge piece was because unfortunately the night before when the light was fading, we fitted it 180 degrees out, so some of the screw holes didn't line up. The lazy option would have been to drill some new holes, but as this was a roof component, I really didn't want to do that as I didn't want the possibility of creating any leaks. This unfortunately meant I had to undo a lot of the work I had just done.
Right, I've got that ridge bit on, however the instructions say that there should be basically some screws that go through where those slots are. Very hard to see. I'm not sure if that's right or if there should be a set of bolts, which are included in the kit. The main problem is though, those bolts are used elsewhere, an awful lot on the door, and I don't know whether I've got 2 spare to be able to put in there. So for the time being, I'm going to leave the roof, because I can always put that back together afterwards, and I'm going to move on to the doors.
First part of sorting out the doors was to fit the door frame. The door frames fitted, I could turn my attention onto the actual doors. This was not without its problems, and so for once I had to spend some time studying the instructions.
So here's an interesting little thing I've just discovered. These parts were labelled D20, and it says that in the instructions. However, there are 2 that are mirror images to the other 2. So, I mean, that solves the problem I was having finding one that would fit the top of the door there, but that is not as per the instructions. Oh well. Well, that's one door done. Now just to do the other one. But first, I'm going to go for a tea break.
With my tea break over, I got the second door fitted and got the doors adjusted. The upper door sliders on these metal sheds have a number of mounting holes, so by playing around with which holes that the doors are actually screwed into, you can change the angle of how they hang, making sure that the 2 doors butt up against each other when they are shut. With the doors fitted and adjusted, I fitted the last of the handles and then fitted the last 2 vents which were missed before.
The door all bolted together, and this vent being the last part that has to be bolted onto the shed, I'm glad to say I do actually have a few nuts and bolts left over. What this means is that I can now bolt the ridge pieces together and I can put the roof panel back in. Slight issue. I can't use my screwdriver or spanner attachment, so I'm going to have to find a very small open-ended spanner for these. Back in a minute. One of the smallest spanners that I own, and it's Imperial, but it's close enough. That's the ridge sorted out. Now I can put the roof panel back in. Now I've run into a slight problem here. That screw was the very last one I had in the packet. I've got plenty of plastic washers, but no screws. Now, if you're wondering what happened to all the screws that I took out, they ended up actually getting put into the door frame. I'm actually missing a screw there. So, bear with me, I'll have to go check through the packets. Right, there are 4 of these little corner pieces that go on there, so that's stolen the back 2 and that one doesn't have a screw in, but that's gave me 3 screws. I believe I am too short. Right, I imagine the audio is not great in here, so I might have to put subtitles. In my quest to get some spare screws, I'm going to remove this frame. It's got about a dozen or so in it, and I don't really need this frame. This frame is designed so you can basically put like boards in and have a nice flat floor, which I'm guessing is great if you're going to put the shed on like gravel or uneven paving slabs or even grass. However, my dad made me a very nice concrete base, so I don't really need it. Also, when I want to try and drag stuff in here on a load dolly, like an engine or a gearbox, it's kind of inconvenient and in my way, so I really could do without it. What I probably should do though, if I'm going to remove this, is screw and basically attach the shed actually into the concrete base. So that's what I'm going to do. There are a number of pre-drilled holes in the metal pieces around the edge that aren't being used, so I'm going to drill it into concrete, fit a wall plug, and then screw it down. I'm going to warn you now, this is probably going to be very, very loud.
This took way longer than I expected and was extremely loud, so for your benefit I've decided to time-lapse my way through it and give you some background music instead. With the shed now secured down to the concrete base, I could dismantle the base frame to free up some screws. With the screws from the base, I could finally fit the last piece to the shed, the edge of the roof.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the finished shed. A big shout out to my mum and dad who built the base for me while I was away last year, and obviously to my dad who helped me build the shed. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please hit that like button and share. If you want to see some other how to build projects and other things that I've been working on the channel, then please select one of the links that should be on the screen there. And if you want to get notifications of when I release future videos, then please hit the subscribe button and obviously remember to hit that notification bell. So the only question now is, what am I putting in the shed?